an advertising ecosystem that uses like zero knowledge cryptography for reporting and really from the ways that the ads are served to the way that the ads are reported and how they're matched. It's all done in a real privacy preserving way. With a lot of these schemes where it's like, give us your data for money, it sounds okay, kind of sometimes, but realistically, these people that are making money off the data do not want you to know where it goes. If all of the stuff coming from publisher sites is junk, and it's really hard to find those voices, people are going to look elsewhere. And I think that's what you're seeing now. Proving that people that say that privacy doesn't matter are completely wrong because people are moving with their feet to it.
Hello everyone, I am Sergio Maldonado and this is Masters of Privacy, a set of interviews covering the intersection of marketing, data, privacy and technology with a clear goal in mind, which is redefining the relationship between people, brands and media around transparency and control. Which is to say, we're aiming for real customer centricity, or if you will, human centricity. We regularly talk to DPOs, CMOs, CDOs, and whoever else we find interesting and able to share valuable insights. So we hope you like it. Please do reach out if you have any ideas on future topics or speakers. Great, we have Luke Mulks here today, and he's VP of Business Operations at Brave Software, makers of the Brave browser. Luke has previously worked in AdTech and print publishing, and he has also founded a few businesses. He is in charge of new business initiatives and strategic revenue growth and oversees the BAT community, or the Basic Attention Token community, at Brave. With Luke, we're embarking on a wide-range conversation encompassing new business models for media owners, privacy-preserving ads, putting a price on personal data, or even the manner in which Apple's bottleneck asphyxiates bolder or more creative approaches to monetizing people's attention, which means antitrust actions, as we've seen recently, should help. We're even on top of that, as a cherry on the cake, we're going to look at Google's privacy sandbox briefly. Let's go for it. Look, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Been looking forward to the conversation.
So have I, yes. To get started, what's the Brave vision for the future of publishers and media on the internet?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think with Brave it starts with users, and we're really a user first company. So, and when you look at how the internet and content creation and monetization has all scaled over time, it's actually scaled in a pretty user hostile way, where users are basically expected to give over their personal information, their behavior, all of that to these companies in exchange for getting free content on the web. And when you look at how the world works now with the impact of media and on society and culture, it's really a bad trade-off for users. So what Brave does is try to set the table by making things user first, which means you're respecting the user's privacy. Anything that's not like a one-to-one conversation like this between a user and a website, a publisher, content creator, etc., is basically blocked unless the user wants to give the information to third parties. And so we do that by having really strong privacy protection at the beginning. Now, on top of that, and this is where we differentiate from a lot of other companies out there, and we have for a long time, is that we want to make monetization and business work with privacy and with this user first model. And so we've done that. We've built an advertising ecosystem that uses like zero knowledge cryptography for reporting and really from the ways that the ads are served to the way that the ads are reported and how they're matched. It's all done in a real privacy preserving way that does not negatively impact the user or give their information away. It all just kind of stays on their client. And so we launched that in 2019. We've scaled that up to millions of users. If they want, they can even opt into Brave Rewards and earn with their attention with the system. And then those that do that can actually pay it forward to content creators, publishers automatically, or they can tip them as they browse the web, and the browser will basically aggregate where they're visiting and spending their attention, and then give those tips or contributions up to the content creators that they visit. So it's a new way of, paying forward the revenue share to content creators. We saw this work best. I mean, when we started this, it was the publisher side was back in 2016. We did this with Bitcoin at first, and content creation has changed a lot since then. You've got YouTube creators and Twitch streamers and all these different people, and Twitter, journalism. A lot of it's happening on Twitter, right? Or X or whatever we're calling it these days. But we see how media has changed over time. And so Brave's adapted to that. And we've actually seen a lot more success on that side, mainly because a lot of information is coming from more trusted sources than it is from publications. And I think that there's been kind of an erosion of trust in media. So we've seen more success with revenue monetization on that side than with the publishers. But yeah, that's kind of our take. Like the long story short on it is build business that works with privacy and give publishers an option to earn from users and treat users first.
I'm really glad to hear that. I did think at the time when you came up with the basic attention token, the idea of attention, I thought this is it. Because I
Mhm.
was following a similar path, thinking there's no way we're going to put a price on personal data. You want to look at something that already has a price, which is our time and attention. Back in the day, there were a few startups, also even around crypto, saying, oh, your data is worth so much money, then you should get paid. And then there was a dilemma. How much do you get paid? What's the unit that you use to pay people? What happens with sensitive data and so on? And who receives the data and how do you enforce privacy rights?
Well, even that, I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's a even the basic meme of this idea that data is like there was a big campaign. I don't know if it's a campaign per se, but a big kind of movement from the advertising space of trying to say, okay, well, data is the new oil or whatever, right? And it's like no, personal data is it's non-fungible. Like oil is fungible. I can give you one barrel of this for one barrel of that, but my data is not your data, and it's not priced that way either in the market. And I think that with a lot of these schemes where it's like give us your data for money, it sounds okay, kind of sometimes, but realistically these people that are making money off the data do not want you to know where it goes. A lot of them can't even tell you where it goes. I spent 6+ years in ad tech and products, and when the GDPR stuff came out where you had to disclose who's managing your data, I look at that list of 200 and I'm like, that's not even all of it. Like I can't, working in the space, I couldn't tell you where the data ended up going because people would just copy the IDs and sync them in a different order, whatever, right? Like it's a messy, messy market that needs fixing.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. And then we saw the other angle, like let's help publishers. And back in the day, it's true there weren't that many, we didn't have Substack growing so much or Ghost and so many people building quality, like individual, like columnists breaking apart from the New York Times or The Verge, whatever. But we started seeing alternatives like scroll.com that eventually got acquired by Twitter to help publishers make money in this new world in a way that they wouldn't have to rely on ad tech. And so many people, not so much because of the privacy challenge, but also because of the ad fraud. So then the challenge is, do publishers want to be helped? And how was your experience, if you want to share, with publishers?
Yeah, no, it's a great one. I mean, having worked with publishers and before coming to Brave, I feel like I felt really well equipped to be working with publishers at Brave. And one thing that was really challenging, especially as the media space has evolved, but initially very much so back if you think back to like 2016 to 2020, a lot of the monetization was still coming directly through publishers. They had a lot of power, but they were seeing diminishing returns, and they were very stubborn. They said, okay, we would go to them and they would say, you can either match us on what we're making, or we see you as a threat because you're blocking our third party advertising where we make all of our money, right? And it's like after several years of that, you can't keep doing the same thing and repeating the same mistakes for the same output. And we really didn't see enough that wanted to try something new. It's like you've got a geriatric patient that knows that they have five things wrong with them, and they know that there are things that they could do now to proactively make a better long-term health for themselves, and they just choose not to do it. And that was what we kept seeing. It didn't matter, big, small, medium. They were all, the small guys were too dependent on it to get bootstrapped. The big guys were way too powerful, right? Like with their relationships with these third-party companies, and Google, and Facebook, all these companies in the interim were all just gaining more and more dominance. And it's really like, these are things that people used to think about in the abstract. And it's like we're now in this phase where all those abstract theories are coming to life in different areas, all kind of at the same time. And you're seeing it. It's like, okay, if publishers can't get this figured out on their own, the technology is going to outpace them. And that's exactly what's happened, right? I think you mentioned Scroll, right? Like Scroll got acquired by Twitter. Well, now Twitter is basically, you can do Twitter Spaces where you can have a live TV show kind of. You can publish long form content. They're putting video content down there now. Like it's becoming its own network. And you're going to see more and more of that. And they're coming up with their own monetization model for their creators, similar to what we did, which is kind of the path forward. I think, it gives the people that, I mean, when you think about how you look at media, right? Like you tune into the voices that you trust, and a lot of that used to be anchored at networks, but they were trusted voices, and more or less opinions getting brought into things now. But people still want to trust the voices that they trust, and they're not going to believe other voices. And if all of the stuff coming from publisher sites is junk, and it's really hard to find those voices, people are going to look elsewhere. And I think that's what you're seeing now. And I think that opportunistically, like the folks that are creating good journalism and content realize that, hey, there's actually a path here where I can be independent, I can make money and have a living, and not be at the mercy of an editing room or editorial staff that's going to cut apart the truth from what I'm doing here because it pisses off some advertiser, like, which, I mean, that's where we're at. Like, this is where you see it. Like, how many times do you go on YouTube and hear content? It doesn't matter if you're listening to something left wing, right wing, in the middle. Every like and subscribe. Oh, we have to be careful with not saying this because we don't want to get demonetized. Like, it's just become these weird conditions on everything, and it's like self-censorship, and it's gross. I don't know. I don't think people like having to hear that, right? But I think if we can give them more independence, and more ways to earn, and that's kind of what we're doing here. And unfortunately, I don't know. I think it's we might have turned a corner on publishing in general. Like, if you see things like Substack and other longer form venues for that can show you just what you would see. Like, I don't think people really care whether they see it on CNN or Substack anymore. Like, I think they actually think Substack's probably more credible these days. No, no, not to be political, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, it doesn't matter. You can put any color on it you want. It's still I think there's a big erosion in trust with mainstream media. And I think if you look at the things that are uniform across these media outlets, where do they all agree on things, and what does that lead to? I think that's where a lot of this mistrust comes from. I mean, when do you really see people unifying, at least from an American perspective? The only times I can think of people not bobbleheads not yelling at each other about things is when it comes to like going to start the next war or going to start the next thing that's going to impact everybody's lives in a negative way. And I think people are tired of that. Like, and especially they were just waiting for something like where we're at now, where now I can get actual, something that seems more honest, directly without having to sit through a bunch of, pharma ads or
Yeah,
whatever.
the paradox is if you rely on large advertisers, a few large advertisers, in theory, your hands are tied, in a stronger way when it comes to who you're going to piss off than when you're relying on programmatic. And there's a paradox in there as well. Like smaller advertisers relying on programmatic, like in e-commerce, they don't have so much power as a Unilever or a P&G. Whenever you're trying to talk about them and the environment. So large publishers are also tied by the fact that they, by nature, depended. If they didn't rely on programmatic, they relied on contextual, or direct negotiation, which is less prone to fraud, better for privacy, but at the same time, it's worse for independents. If you look at, like, in some countries, the large telco operator is sort of a dictator. Nobody can talk
Right.
badly about them, in many countries. So then this is true. We've seen that, but then when you've got so many authors and everybody now building their own channel, and for opinion, that's working already. For journalism, people want to somehow build a new bundle, because you still want to get, again, proper reports, proper coverage of the news. People still visit homepages for for all the large media groups, and they need to be monetized. So, do you see anything happening in the form of a rebundle? Can Brave help with something like that?
We tried. I mean, I think in a bunch of levels, we tried going to publishers around. I mean, we have a newsfeed product in the browser too, where we basically, and this is all done in a privacy preserving way, like through like a privacy preserving CDN, where okay, your browser knows what you're viewing, and so trying to surface content that's relevant to interest, but also current,
Yeah.
and then giving users that power to also control the feeds. They can add if there's an RSS feed for it, they can add it to the site. I mean, they can add it to Brave News. And so kind of I think that the homepage has changed. People want a homepage. I think you're absolutely right about that. I think whether it's Apple today or Brave News or Google News or whatever, like that concept of that front page of the newspaper is not going away anytime soon, and it does need to be monetized, and we monetize it on our side too. But I think that like these are results of like, I mean, the big publishers could negotiate with Apple on these deals around news and other things like that. But I mean, they're all distracted. They don't want to do anything. Like I think it still comes down to the tech, and if you can scale the tech fast enough, it forces these parties to get to the table and make a look at the model differently. And that's been our challenge. But we've seen that challenge turn a corner too. Back in 2018, 2019, when we would talk to publishers, we barely had a million users at that point. Now we have over 70 million users every month that are using Brave. And so you see that's not even huge compared to what Google or even Firefox have, right? Like, but still, I mean, compared to 1 million, you see how that changes the tide and changes the attitude. And it becomes, and you even saw this with Facebook when it came out too, where they're like, okay, we're going to do ads our way. And, they modified that over time, but really, I mean, you get to a level where they have to pay attention to you, and that's what really moves the needle. I think unless there's just direct demand from users and customers in the market, which that can work too, but that you got to grow that somehow. And I think what helps us is the fact that we're a really good software company that likes to build products that are respectful of people, but that's also a mission
Yeah.
too. And I think that that's something where back in one thing I used to see a lot, and I don't know if this is going to touch on another question later, but I'm going to go in this direction anyway. Back when we started, I mean, I left AdTech to come to Brave, and a lot of people thought I was crazy. And well, people don't care about their privacy. People don't care about, they give it away, especially younger people. And I think that we've seen that go from theory to like people actually moving with their feet. And I think whether you're looking at Brave with 70 million monthly active users or a company like Proton that has, I think they have 100 million plus users now, you cannot argue with that anymore. That means that there are value props, whether direct or indirect, that come with having good privacy that people want. And, then it's a marketing challenge because the value props are significant and they're meaningful. And yeah, it's just a matter of letting people know that they're out there.
Yeah. Plus, you've touched on something very useful. You've touched on convenience, which is a key element. I've been using Brave for a few years. I'm super happy. It's only a few websites where I see they would be telling me, look, I see you've got an ad blocker. There's
Hmm.
always going to be some of the, but surprisingly, most of websites with even sophisticated systems for no matter what, they work very well, and you've made it convenient. First, you again, there's the ad blocking element. Second, there is the something that I love specifically, which is the cookie consent banner blocker that came later, something like last year, right? And it's something
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
yeah.
once had to build myself. We built ourselves once, one a few years back, because I hated cookie banners when they were just, again, a joke. So,
Yeah.
so now you have it, but at the same time, now you're running counter. You're going farther away from the interests or from the entrenched interests of these large publishers that now even have these, consent or pay that we've been debating here with a few people on the podcast. But at the same time, you've made it very convenient. So there's the element of privacy for those that really can think long term in terms of what's the impact of whatever I shared today, or what's the impact on others of data that I think only affects me, but in fact affects everyone. And then secondly, the element of convenience. But again, because that's taking you farther apart from these interests that never change, because as you were pointing at, publishers are very slow to react. And again, I've also been working with them. And something I see is there's like two fronts on every publisher. Still today, you've got people that used to deal with subscriptions, still subscriptions.
Hmm.
And then you've got people
Hmm.
that deal with ads. And it's like they do not talk to each other and they're sometimes at odds. And you're trying to
Oh
help
yeah, yeah.
some people to make money in subscriptions. People may be very open, but then the others, they don't want to lose audience volumes because they've been audited and they compete in that open ecosystem. And so it seems like it's very hard to find the solution because they themselves still have an internal battle and you cannot fight that battle for them. So now that you're
No,
getting
that's very true.
and you're getting farther from them, so is there uh, is there a moment where you think we should just simply lose hope and maybe embrace a new model where all of these new creators come with their own columns and models, and then the new rebundle, if again if the sick man doesn't want to be helped, then maybe it shouldn't be part of the new bundle. How do you see that? At what point do you think we should maybe lose hope?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to hold hope. But I also think that if you're trying to be a business, you can't build a business on hoping, right? Like, and that's one thing where I mean, Brave's always kind of we're a for-profit company, and so we've had to always think about this from a business perspective. I mean, I think we'll always want publishers to have a way to get monetized, but realistically, you can't go against the grain on what the masses want. And I think that you brought up a really good example of publishers. At publishers, you've got subscription side of things that are paid or premium subscription side of things, and then you've got the advertising side of things. And we saw this a lot. They were at odds with each other, but even from like the CRO level, like a chief revenue officer level in the company, they see the subscription model as something that they do not want to let go or compromise on at all. Like we would go to publishers and be like, look, like how about like let's get creative here. Like, what if we could do like a pay as you go on certain articles or content or certain authors, right? Like writers, columnists, etc. And then show advertising to everybody else. And there would always be a laundry list of excuses as to why they wouldn't do that, or where there's no way we're going to give up $20 a month for like $1 an article or whatever meaningful thing or a meaningless thing they treated it as. And so I think, yeah, it's the patient. It doesn't want to work, but I think that like the interesting thing is that if you look at these new platforms, the big media publishers are personalities there too. So I think that they're forced to be everywhere too, in the same way that a journalist that's independent is, and that's changing the game. But I think we're still not. It's still evolving. I don't think that the new norm is established yet, and I think that right now we're still in this real growing pains phase of this because you're seeing, okay, these new platforms are getting reactionary. These new platforms are having to deal with the publisher or the issues that the publishers had to deal with advertisers before. They're just happening on a different level. I mean, look at YouTube, right? Like a lot of the same issues you would get from advertising on publisher sites, the same kind of self-censoring issues that you get there, you are now seeing on YouTube. And then Elon takes X over, and he's even dealing with this on other fronts with them, and in some ways more aggressively than others. I think this is all just screaming that there needs to be more disintermediation between the sources and the revenue, and we haven't figured it out yet. And I think that there's a bunch of reasons why. Mainly, I mean, if you look at the crypto side of it, there's a lot of noise around that. But right now, to break it down, you're seeing kind of the situation where dominant nation states are trying to reach into global networks in a way that resembles a lot of what the crypto wars in the 90s were like, where the United States wanted to have ownership over encryption, right? Like and put chips into things and whatever. And you're seeing a similar thing on in the crypto world right now, where okay, these are globally accessible networks that are easy to use, at least on some levels. Their usability is always an issue there, but we're working on that. But the accessibility is there. Like whether I'm in Africa or wherever, I can go and transact. The growing pains are still happening there, but I think we're seeing signs of that that are positive as well. Where even in the U.S., where you have like overreach happening, you have the judicial branch that's saying no, like these things you guys are overreaching, and so that still has to that's still early. They still have to work through those issues. But I think that these are all trending in the right direction. I think if you can, these concepts of having, user first, self custody, and control over your own means, and not even ask permission, whether it's viewing content you want to, it's so important. I mean, like, this is why I think everybody tries to like complicate everything with a lot of noise, but these are fundamentals. Whether it's privacy and your right to privacy, or whether it's how having different sources of information is important for a population that needs to be thinking critically about real issues that impact real people, and how if you over moderate or over regulate what people can see, you're really doing a negative to the broader society. And if people will move towards where that freedom lives, and it'll be weird and fringy in the beginning, like it always is. But the masses, over time, these moderation rules, whether it's publishers or platforms or whatever, like they always end up going from one side to the other to where everybody's getting impacted and the next thing pops up. And I think that that's where we're at right now. It'll be interesting to see how this settles, but I don't think it's settled because if you look everywhere, everything's getting disrupted, not just on the internet. If you look at like, cable TV and the way that people, I mean, I can go to a movie theater or I can buy a movie for $20 on Disney Plus, right? Everything's getting disrupted. This is the stage. It's exciting. I mean, yeah,
And you're right. Look, every factor that we thought was going to move back in 2017 or whenever is actually moving. It's true that
right.
maybe we've been too early, and now slowly
Yeah.
we see it happening. And that leads me to another question. So something and also I'll say that, of course, despite everything I've said, I do subscribe to the FT, to the Atlantic, to
Sure.
New
Sure.
Yorker. There's a few media brands that I'm super loyal to. So I love the
Hmm.
FT. I think it's an amazing place to congregate all of these opinions, news. So there's some people I believe they do a really good job, but again, you can only subscribe to so many of these, right?
Right.
And then sometimes I
Right.
do want to read, an article here and there. So I want to find the solution. So something that we did back in the day, I'll tell you, through Privacy Cloud, this was having a single sign-on across multiple publishers, where we tried to build this idea of the sort of postponed or decoupled attention. This concept, I don't know if it makes a lot of sense in English, but the idea is that we thought, okay, we take your attention from here and we'll use that attention later on. So today you read, but you owe us some attention. This was very hard to do because in the end, what I thought was the biggest challenge was Apple. And I'll explain that. So as you'll see where I'm going. I think the fact that we had these dictatorships, to be a bit strong with words,
No, I think it's
on
it's
the
it's a
mobile
good word.
platforms, on Android and iOS, meant we couldn't really do what we wanted because we had an app where you could see who was accessing your data and so on. But it was on the very app where you could then monetize that attention that was still sort of being piled up and sort of owed. And if we wanted to postpone that attention and let you enjoy content and then see who was paying for everything you had been reading, Apple wouldn't let us do that. So I'm very hopeful. And back in the day, whenever, but again, a few years ago, I did write in our, in our business plan, this is not going to work unless antitrust, authorities jump on Apple. There's no way this is going to work while Apple decides what's the meaning of privacy, and it's their own meaning, what's the meaning of, of user control, and they decide what every app should do on the App Store so they can make money. Now there's some hope. I know that the case from the, from the DOJ is pretty sloppy according to many. I know the case under the DMA in the EU is also pretty delicate. But what do you think? Do you think this is a good opening for Brave? The fact that Apple may be forced to opening the gates?
Oh, I think it's a great opportunity, and I think we're actually seeing this firsthand. We tweeted out something maybe a couple of weeks ago where we actually showed once some of this antitrust took out on Apple to where Brave started to get surfaced more to Apple users. We saw a 30% increase in installs like from that one move, right? And if you think about it from adopting a product down to like even the content level and monetization. I mean, I feel your pain. Like we had to completely re-architect how our Brave reward system worked for iOS because after having it out, despite having it out for a year, where it was out there for a year, it got through many updates, no one flagged anything, and then all of a sudden one day, they decided it wasn't kosher anymore, and we had to completely I mean, you had people in here like engineers remapping how the flows could work. Just so you end up having this version of it over here, and then everyone else over here. And I think not only do you have to deal with those moats of those
Arbitrary
app stores,
rules, yeah.
it's really messy. And I think that between like issues like the antitrust one, and then if you see what things like Epic Games are doing, all these different issues are coming to a head, whether it's content publishing, gaming, or other music, all sorts of different angles, and then even down to the way that payments are processed. And it really, you're seeing, if you step back, it's this big debate over where's the open web and where is stuff that's coming on your device. Like, and unfortunately, those apps on your device have even more access to your own data than the open web does, right? And so it becomes a privacy issue too. And it's like, okay, like do I have to ask permission to Apple to buy something? That's stupid. Why would I do that? I can go pay with cash for something, like, and not ask for permission. Like, and there's so many overlaps between kind of crypto ethos and privacy and just basics that are kind of coming. That's what's so interesting about it. But I think there's another wrench to throw in this mix too when you look at what's happening with AI and where you've got models that are getting trained on publisher content. In some case, some of that content's behind paywalls and people are scraping that content, non-attributing, and calling it derivative in some cases where it clearly isn't. And there's lots of issues around that now too that are publishers are just in a dire place right now. I think it's going to get more and more difficult for them. But I also think that, it gives me hope where if somebody can do this really well, if somebody can, and we're trying to do this. If you look, we have a search engine at Brave. If you go to search.brave.com, we actually have an AI summarizer built into the search engine, and we're about to release a big update for that actually makes it even better, where it's almost more like a prompt that output but it attributes everything. It shows you exactly where it is, and then it links it down to that search engine result page below it. I think there's a lot of really great room for people that want to get it right to make good examples of what getting it right looks like right now. And I think that that's where we're at. I think publishers be damned, but if you're attributing it to publishers, then you're doing the right thing. If you're making quality and sourcing quality and trying to make the most quality, high integrity result for your users, because that's what you should be doing anyway. But I think there's a real room for that in the market that wasn't there, and I think it might even help these rebundling concepts, right? Like these things, because AI is going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be everywhere. Like you're not going to be able to control that. And the same thing with a lot of these other technologies right now. And the more that we can all, as technology solutions, come up with things that are building with integrity and building, whether it's free, whether or not you agree with this user first principle, I think it's gaining traction. It's something worth paying attention to because, honestly, without users, you have nothing. And I think that that was a fatal mistake from publishers was by underestimating the power of their readership and their user base to just they will move and if they think you're compromising against their interests, they will leave you. And that's one of the things where I mean, we get this question a lot, like, oh gosh, like what would happen if Brave got too big and you guys started to compromise or things started happening. I say, well, one, we're open source, so people can check the code base, and make sure we're not behaving. But two, when you go out there with this banner of trying to do the right thing for users, the minute anything smells weird, you hear 1,000 people telling you it, and the minute that anything even looks like it might be off, you can't explain why it's happening like reasonably, like people should leave you, like and that's one of those things where we do not the minute we turn our back on users, we deserve to lose our users, like and I think that that's a big connecting forces in the company, and that's why we do a lot of the things that we do is because that's you want to be able to build trustless things, but you want to be able to have people trust in the brand, and that's a delicate balance with the way things are monetized. But I don't think it's impossible, and I think that there's never been a better opportunity to create really good quality, high integrity things that can touch millions of people's lives as there is right now, and that can get into billions too. I mean, that's the other thing that people don't people underestimate this when you're talking about web browsers or search engines is that these are not millions of addressable users. The addressable user base is in the billions, and so if you can get it right and scale to 100 million, then the likelihood of that being able to scale to a billion is pretty easy. I mean, like it's a matter of getting the right pieces to work together, but the fundamentals are there, and I think that's where we can make the best change, whether that's with monetization or just with like proving that people that say that privacy doesn't matter are completely wrong because people are moving with their feet to it.
Very good. And you look, and losing trust at speed is what's happening to publishers in Europe these days. The whole challenge of consent or pay. So many people are just simply going away. So I know that's what people on the AdTech side, on the inventory monetization side of publishers wanted, but I'm not sure it's helping subscription side people at all. And so let me ask you this then. So knowing that that's what's happening, and what you're saying is very interesting. If within Brave you can combine this sort of this perplexity now that it's so hot experience to credit where the content comes from, at the same time combining the same experience, the ongoing navigation, which is what Brave does for us.
Mm-hmm.
That's a winning up. And then then what I'm thinking is through doing that experience of the prompt and then the content, and I can keep on browsing, you're also helping decouple even further distribution and consumption, or rendering and consumption, meaning that this whole idea of clinging on to holding on to your inventory as if that was gold, that disappears, because then what's golden is not your inventory, it's the content itself, no matter how it's processed. It could be used to train, it could be used to, again, to render it in many different ways. So the fact that you can do that means that there's an even greater need for someone to monetize in a different way. If we rely on micropayments based on consumption or whatever we can figure out through tokens or attention tokens, then we still have a challenge of all of these little retailers that need to generate demand. So I want to combine the two and ask you about the privacy sandbox. And finally, we land on the privacy sandbox, which means Google is trying. I mean, we've seen the drama with the UK Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, and how they're waiting for them to agree that Google doesn't have this wild advantage to owning all the first-party data once third-party cookies are disappear. But you're built on Chromium as well. So in a way, just like Edge is built on Chromium, and they said they're going to support some or some parts, I can't remember now, of the I'm not sure they're supporting Topics API, which I think it's the core value prop these days, but of the privacy sandbox. How do you see the privacy sandbox? Do you see Brave ever supporting it? And do you see otherwise a way for Brave to help not just media owners, content owners, or independent creators, but also retailers that want to generate demand. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think so. Lots to unpack, but I think that
Yeah,
like looking at it from first principles, I mean, you're not gonna how can I say this in a way that's not terrible or too explicit? I think that, relying on the drug dealer to give you a better drug that's going to make you healthier is probably not going to get you a healthier output, right? Like I think the problem with the privacy sandbox, and we've been vocal about this. Our head of privacy research, P. Snyder, wrote some pieces on our website that people can reference. And he was also very active in the standards bodies and on a bunch of different initiatives around this. A lot of ways it's putting lipstick on a pig. If you look at how Google has grown as a company, still I think over 90% of their revenue comes from advertising, and that machine relies on third parties, whether they're third parties calling themselves first parties, or whether that first party data is then being processed by
yeah,
these third parties. Or I don't. It's all just a ball of mess, and what we can do is, if the topics API is the way that this is getting monetized in that world, we can mimic that on our world that actually is looking at this from a holistic private privacy preserving perspective, where from our point of view, the more of the user's information, from our point of view, the best deal is one where the user doesn't give any information away. Because if you have the choice of having to do that or not having to do that, the better choice is to not have to do that, because people don't need to have their info given away. The problem with things like the privacy sandbox is that they're trying to kind of fit a square peg in a round hole of like, how can I still make all of these different third parties money in a system that's not as horrible, but ultimately, if you are being objective about it, actually leads to probably worse privacy behavior over time, because they'll take a stand that, oh, fingerprinting is bad. But what they aren't going to tell you is that a lot of these solutions, okay, get rid of the third party cookie. Then what do you do? Well, a lot of these guys are then saying, okay, let's make a single identifier off of an email address, or a single identifier off of a hardware device ID, or something that's even more pervasive than a third party cookie that's even harder to obfuscate. And then they're saying, okay, well, we're going to make a first party data platform that you're going to be able to import all of your publisher user data into. And it's like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Like, why are we wasting time trying to placate this industry that's obviously on a path to doom, where it's just a matter of time. But like they made so much money, they can litigate forever. You're not going to beat them there. You're not going to beat them. You're going to beat them in hearts and minds, and you're going to beat them by showing them the wins. And that's where you can do it. And so for us to work in this space, it's not to adopt things like the privacy sandbox, because we already have a better model than that. We already have a model of that that leaves a smaller footprint, that gives you efficient. We've shown that you can effectively match advertising to users without them having to give up their privacy. And we will never move away from that, because why would you? That's like saying, let me take the upgrade away and let me give you a regression. Like nobody wants that. When you have something that can be better, it's a marketing challenge, really. But I think that, the marketing wouldn't speak for themselves. And I think that, while some of these things might look good on paper, you're really just kind of like delaying the inevitable. But I also think that, to your point, they're advertising useful. Advertising, we've shown, I mean, we have ad units in Brave that users can disable if they want, that do not impact their privacy, and over 95% of our users keep them enabled. And so, some ad units we have, 20% of them are enabled, if they're not on by default. And so I think that, there is advertising is not the problem. Bad advertising is, I mean, not bad advertising per se, but like user hostile advertising that says the only way for us to do our job is to take your data. I think that's a bunk model. Like we don't need to do that. Like we don't. You can even do it programmatically without having to give away all the users' data. If you're really being honest about what you're trying to do, you do not need all this baggage. And I think that that's our case to prove to market. We're continuing to prove it, but it's not an easy thing to do either. Like, you cannot, getting in with agent, you can show an agency that you have a better product that is mathematically sound, that is giving them something without the margins of error that you typically expect as a cost of doing business, and they will not believe it because they're not familiar with it. And that's the big challenge too, is that you're having to try and work a lot of these things into old models. But ultimately, if you can prove to a retailer that you can put $1 in the machine and get $2 out of it, they will put $1 into the machine. If we can build tech that effectively helps them to earn revenue, and they don't care as long as they're making money. Like that's what they care about. As long as it's objectively measurable and it can do it. It's not easy. Nothing that we're doing has ever been easy. But that's why we're here. Like it's because a lot of us, and myself included, but I'm just one small cog in a team of like people that are very smart that have come from all walks of tech. Because this is basically, from our point of view, this is it. This is your second chance to remake it in a way that's not gonna. If you had a second chance to go back and rework the models, what would you do? And that's what we're doing here. And so we have people on staff like, I mean, Brendan Ike is our co-founder and we created JavaScript. We got people that worked on some of the underlying, internet protocols in the 70s that are working with us now. And we've got people that are brand new to the space that are really leading privacy researchers and et cetera. And I think, you can get them all together. We don't always have to agree on everything. And a lot of times, we're really passionate about certain things, but it's all because we really care about what we're doing. And I think that this is the second chance, and the browser is the place that you're going to have that last battle, because that's really beyond that's the point of no return. Like it is the user's agent, and if you cannot get it right at the browser level, then it's already too far gone. And so we're militant about this, but we also want to be a partner with companies, and sometimes that means going directly to them, and sometimes that means you mentioned convenience. Like it's huge. Like if we can make it convenient, and a lot of times it's not really that hard once you figure out the basic problem. I can't measure it this way. How can I figure it out another way? If you have to do that with things that people take for granted, it takes more work up front. But once you have the things in place, then it's a matter of just showing people the math and making it work. So yeah, so I think we can, as long as we're delivering for users, the retailers will come. 90% of browser users are making e-commerce transactions in a browser. We can deliver to that. Like I'm confident about that. We've got a search engine, we have an AI model in a browser, like we have ways to pay with dollars, crypto, all this stuff. It's all the right building blocks to build something new, and really give that second chance a place to grow.
Look, this is really good. Great job, all of you. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Thank you. Okay, that's all for today. Please follow the Masters of Privacy channel on LinkedIn if you want to find some interview transcripts, cheat sheets, and other useful resources and surprises every now and then. On top of that, episode notes and other feeds are available on mastersofprivacy.com. Thank you for listening.